So Dr. Hayes was recommended us by Charles Jasper, a community member, and just a very meaningful figure once I began to dive into the work that Dr. Hayes had done. Here's a brief biography. Dr. Stephen C. Hayes is Emeritus Professor of Psychology at the University of Nevada, Reno, and President of the Institute for Better Health. He developed contextual behavioral science, originating its philosophical foundation, functional contextualism, basic science of human cognition, relational frame theory, or RFT, and its therapeutic application, acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT. He co-developed Prosocial for group cooperation, advanced the psychological flexibility model of suffering and well-being, and more. Dr. Hayes' contributions have been recognized with awards, including the Lifetime Achievement Award and others. He's the author of 47 books, The Liberated Mind, and nearly 700 scientific articles. He is among the world's most cited psychologists and continues to influence the field through his research and innovation. So that's quite a biography, Dr. Hayes. It's a pleasure to have you on, though.
It's certainly a pleasure to be here, and apologies for being a little bit late.
It's completely all right. So I wanted to kind of ground this discussion after that bio and what might initially seem the ACT version or model of therapy to be somewhat intellectual to those just entering. I kind of wanted to ground it just in your the experience that turned you on to this path, and it was one of the more profound articulations of someone standing up inside the first noble truth I've heard. And I wondered if you would just take us to kind of the panic disorder, and then that one night where, you stood up inside of a different truth. I wondered if you'd walk us through that.
Yes, I have been on a journey of ever since what I call my night on the carpet. There was an earlier journey, and then since I've been dedicated to try to understand the human mind and come to the smallest set of processes, things you can do that would do the most good for the most people in the most areas. And that got called into check when I developed a panic disorder, and over 3 years just spiraled down into it. And I used the methods that were available to me at the time from my scientific training. And almost everything that I threw at it, and that would be part of the problem, those very words, was basically on a path of increasing its grip, its impact. And in a TEDx talk, I tell this story of hitting bottom inside, being awakened in the middle of the night and thinking I have a heart attack, and that this is new and this isn't just another panic attack. And then having kind of an out-of-body experience and looking back at myself and finding that I didn't actually call the emergency room as my mind was telling me I had to. And I could almost sense what was coming. And then kind of the way I describe it is like watching myself from a distance, but watching my mind play out what would happen. I came to the horrible realization in that little, the way I describe it is like a snippet of an upcoming film, that if I actually did make that call, I was going to be told this is just a panic attack. And I knew that was so, even though initially it had all the symptoms. And to me, in that moment, it was like, I'm at an end now. I've done everything I know how to do. I'm going to lose my career. I can't be a psychologist. I'm not going to be able to be a teacher. I literally couldn't give a lecture without showing films. And even that was hard because my hands would shake so bad I couldn't get them in the sprockets. There used to be film with sprockets for young people with projectors and all of that. And I didn't find a way out. When I hit bottom, I found a way in. And it's a familiar way in. I think that almost all of us have. I've tried to unpack it a little bit, but the way I describe it is turning and running towards the dinosaur and leaping into its mouth, which is a dream that I had when I was a little boy and would run from dinosaurs. And no matter how fast you ran, they were faster. But it turned out somewhere in a lucid dream, I realized if I turned and jumped in its mouth, I'd wake up. And then I did that regularly. And turns out Tyrannosaurus Rex doesn't find that very fun. And so it stopped coming to me in my dreams. And somehow, somewhere, I can unpack the sources of the training, and some of it are spiritual and religious traditions to which I was exposed. Some of it probably is just things like that common experience. I think many people have the experience that when you open up and show up, the world unfolds differently. And even you can usually show it. I don't want to make it sound too special. But for me, it was profound. And I stood up inside a promise that I will not run from my own experience. And that then unfolded in a completely different way. And then I got very curious about that. And I spent 20 years trying to understand what the processes were with my science hat on before writing the textbooks and all of that. So we are unusual in that, yes, we're a therapy tradition, but only about a fifth of our studies are on that. Most of our studies are on all the other areas in your life where you want to own up, show up. Relationships, dealing with disease, dealing with your own wounds and places where you wound others. So that's a brief telling. But if you would permit me,
please,
I would like to just share with folks that this is not special. And here's a way I can prove it to you. If you've watched my videos and stuff, you've probably heard it before, but some may not have. If you just think of an issue that is very, very, very challenging for you psychologically, and allow yourself to put your body in a shape of you at your worst when dealing with that issue, and then you at your best when dealing with that issue, but don't change the issue. Exact same issue. We've taken pictures around the world, and almost everybody, that's really not an exaggeration, will show you a variant of this at their worst. This is given to me by a PhD graduate of mine, Sarah Bunting. It's called The Suffering Buddha, as you would know. But for me, it's just a simple world wood carving that reminds me of my visit to hell at the bottom of my struggle. But conversely, at your best, your head comes up, your eyes open, your arms and hands come out, you might stand up, and you're ready to be open, aware, and actively engaged in a life worth living. So that tells me if everybody can show that, everybody has had the life experiences. It's just I was a little denser and had to struggle a little longer before life would provide me with the needed teaching.
Thank you, Dr. Hayes. It's interesting because I do, using the Buddhist framework I have been so soaked in for so long, I can't help but map on certain aspects of the first noble truth and confronting it, and then the commitment part of ACT to like walking the fourth noble truth, which I think is one of the reasons it's such a potent system, because there's movement towards your values. But just to give people some grounding in these frameworks that we'll be discussing, would you say a few words about how you developed RFT, Relational Frame Theory, and how it informed ACT, and what ACT is? So, just a small question there. You can take the next hour.
Thank you for answering that question. Sometimes when people really want to be relevant, you don't want to ask that question. And I think it's actually the most important, finding a way to talk about it. When you language about language, it's inherently confusing because you're speaking about something that goes beyond what you're speaking about. And nevertheless, we as a species have done something extraordinary. We have created a symbolic learning system that is a different evolutionary stream. And my dog, Diogi, doesn't know how to be other than in the present. We have the relational learning, a symbolic learning capability to disappear into the ruminations of the past or the worries about the future. We can step outside ourselves, look back, and find ourselves wanting. We can criticize ourselves. We can put on a mask and pretend a persona in hopes that we'll be included in the group. We can yearn to feel and solve the problem of feeling by only feeling the good stuff, or only having thoughts that we like and trying to push the other ones away. All of those things are a train wreck to human prosperity, to human relationships, human connection, to being able to be whole and free. RFT boils down to a very, very simple idea. Many, many animals in the world can learn how to relate things because of how they look, what they're like. We are the only ones that broke free from that and can relate things in two directions and then in combinations based on social cues, the group suggesting that that's how they relate. So we can say that a nickel is smaller than a dime. It's not. It's not. In the world of related events that all the rest of creation lives in, it is for us. And when you're a 3-year-old, you want the nickel. And when you're a 6-year-old, you want the dime. Well, if you can do that with a dime, you can have $1 million and it's not enough. You can have $1 billion and it's not enough. You can be loved by your wife, your children. You can have everything and be the loneliest person on the planet. And the way I prove this, so there's a little ditty, the RFT ditty. After 40 years of research, and this is hundreds of studies that help children, for example, who don't have that sense of self, who don't have these language functions, we now know how to train it. And we know where misery of the kind that we're dealing with, typically with mental health problems, begins. It begins right at that moment when you can step aside yourself, look back at yourself, and evaluate yourself. If you wanted an easy question with children, if they can understand time, place, and person enough to know what will happen next Tuesday, or what do I look like in the eyes of my mother, or what is my mother feeling if I went behind her eyes, or what was it like last week when the children teased me, or what will it be like? So you can move consciousness around time, place, and person. And that's wonderful. It's at the source of the universality of spiritual experiences. When the bipolarity breaks down and we break into a higher level of consciousness, that's wonderful. It's horrifying when you don't know how to deal with its implications. And the way I deal with this in workshops is I say, how old were you when you first had the thought that you're not good enough, that you're not lovable, that you're mean, that there's something wrong with you? And almost universally, it's right about preschool age, when you have no protection, really. And you do the logical, reasonable, sensible, pathological things humans do to protect yourself from the pain and to be sure that you're included. So thank you for asking about RFT. It can get geeky and abstract, but the bottom line is we can then use this to bring children into consciousness, knowing full well when they get there, the thorns will grow. And every parent has seen that when their innocent babies become like hell. And then we need methods to learn how to sit with our history, the emotions and cognitions that echo into the present, and do it with a sense of equanimity so we can become wise, show up in the present moment consciously, where I mean in the deepest sense, even beyond what you're conscious of, but the part of you that connects you in consciousness to others at the very least. And you can explore that deeper and deeper with spiritual traditions, and then onboard all of that into orienting towards what intrinsic qualities you want to reflect in your life and how to create habits like that, while scaling that to your also your relationships, your culture, and your body. So the act part, I can cut to the bottom line and give you a sentence, but all of that, what RFT did within the 20 years where almost nobody knew anything about ACT because we were giving talks to tiny little groups, I always thought that it's not enough to have a method that's helpful, you have to know why. And so we did 4 randomized trials, only published 1 to help my first PhD get a job, and then no more for 20 years. And that's pretty crazy, but what we did in those 20 years is try to unpack the human mind, RFT, work out the processes, methods that move them, work on our philosophy, because it's very hard to do this kind of work without accidentally turning people into machines or something like that. And then we stepped forward with methods, but I don't think of it as really as a technique, and I don't really care about ACT as a name. I just care about the processes that can be put into the human heart and head and hands. Heart first, but also we want to understand them and we want to be able to use them like tools that will move us forward. And I can summarize the 25 years of research that followed the first book after the 20 years of research on a few studies that it works and then why, with a single sentence. Life is asking you to learn how to be more open, aware, and actively engaged in a values-based life while scaling that to your relationships and your body. And so far as I can tell, in psychotherapy anyway, properly measured, all of the known studies that figured out the why question, not just the how question, can be summarized in that sentence. That I care about. I don't care about ACT per se.
And what you point to there, among other things, cognitive flexibility and this sort of key group of 6 sort of hidden under that metric. But before moving on to that, just to back up to RFT, Relational Frame Theory, because I find it fascinating. And it's interesting, Longpo Cha, one of his key teachings, the teaching that got Longpo Ajahn Pasano to go seek him out was he held up a stick and said, "Is this stick big or small?" And, his disciples were kind of baffled. And he said, "Look, if you're building a house, it's small. If you want a toothpick, it's big." And, that same kind of version of that teaching shows up everywhere. But it's not initially obvious why that would cause the thorns to come out. And yet it does, this, is it that we begin measuring ourselves against everything, better than, worse than, equal to, in the Buddhist, trinity of conceit? Why is it that we have no ground to stand on? Why is suffering come from this, from that kind of RFT world?
Boy, that's a good question. And I love the example of the stick. And, the Latin name for such a stick, a straight stick, was regla, which meant a straight stick, and became to mean the stick by which you're measured. And eventually, the word rule comes from it, and even those who lay down the line, and then eventually the rulers. So it has a history, and your mind is straight sticking you. But the example there of is this big or small shows what is especially human about us, which is that in the rest of the world, relations, when they're learned, and we're spectacularly good at it even as infants, of learning non-arbitrary relations like bigger and smaller sticks. But when that break happens, when it's now by attribution socially, and even 1 million is not enough, as an example, and it breaks free of the form, we enter into a world of infinite possibilities in terms of cognitive content. But the processes that we need to bring to our life actually can easily shrink into developing and following the rules. And it becomes a barrier, a problem. We did a lot of research in the lab showing that you give people even very simple rules and they lose contact with their own intuition and experience so profoundly that you can have a dog or a cat or a horse easily beat a human being on problems that require the abandonment of a rule. I did a study years ago, several studies. We would bring in, say, push this button and it's worth money, points worth money. And the faster you push it, the more you'll get. And you set it up so that's true. And then you flip it to a thing where it's only a certain amount of time has to go by, but it's variable. And then the next response will produce a reward. Every creature on the planet slows down except one. And you're looking at the one. They're pushing and they're pushing. You can even set it up so that if you don't slow down, you get no points. They're still pushing because you get to work. They're following a rule and they break, and you can actually tag it to that time I was talking about, where we begin to develop and follow rules. I did the math on this. It may shock folks a little bit. I hope it does. Of the paradox of being human. If the core of this is learning to relate things arbitrarily, by social convention, just because we say so, a nickel's smaller. If you just pick any objects in your environment right now, don't pick human beings. It's not kind to do this with human beings. Pick any object, and then I'll give you a strange relation you don't usually deal with, but it could be any relation. I'll do is the father of. Whichever one you saw first, how is that the father of whatever you saw second? If your children's life depended on it, you're going to be able to come up with an answer. It's an odd question. Now flip it. How the second one is the father of the first, and you can come up with an answer. All right, now here's the fun game. Take all the relational words that you know, all of the objects, events, etc. and all of their attributes, and say, okay, that's the simplest thought. This and its attributes is related in this particular way to this and its attributes. How many thoughts potentially in your head? And the answer is more than molecules in the universe. So that's our playing field. And that's wonderful. It's awesome. But it's also awful. Because that wild horse can turn on you. And, there's no delete button in the nervous system that's healthy. So at that point where you're thinking I'm the lowest of the low and I'm the worst of the worst, or I'm the greatest and the grandest, and either of those, you've now done something that will be with you the rest of your life. The rest of your life. Even if you forget it, you can learn it more quickly later. And that research has been done. So short of brain injury, and don't pray for that, please don't. So how are we going to ride the tigers that we're on? Well, that's the wisdom traditions and the best of the therapy traditions and art and literature and poetry and music and dance. And human beings have been thinking about this for a long time.
So to sort of summarize, is it the issue that because as humans, we have this kind of profound capacity to relate innumerable objects and attributes to others and create relations between ourselves and other things, that to guard against that entropy, we do create kind of strong grooves for our minds and self-views that become very stubborn and stuck. And that the solution to that is what? How do we, is it just increasing cognitive flexibility so we can see that happen and get a new set of values? And if there's no delete button, what do you do if you...
Well, these are wonderful questions, and that's exactly what ACT is trying to do. And the reason I don't like thinking of this as a technique or therapy, and I say, take the processes, rename it, use it, fine, that's all great. Let's not argue about that, use different terms, fine, but let's focus on the human condition. And yes, they're called mental disorders for a reason. And I think, although there's many things about us that are characteristic, our capacity to cooperation is extraordinary. And I think that's where language actually came from. And I could spend time unpacking that and why I think that. Because of that, our cultural development is, well, not because of that, but another quality is our cultural development is spectacular, and cognition. And of the three, cognition is arguably especially unique because we can't find non-human animals in careful preparations who do what I'm talking about. Learn it in one, derive it in two, put it in networks that change what you do. That's the ditty for remembering what RFT is about. But what you're asking about, let me give you an example. If you're riding a wild horse in which anything can apply to anything, how are you going to keep negative thoughts and comments, things people have said? There's all kinds of things that are in your head. Prejudiced thoughts, racist jokes, horrifying images. How are you going to keep that from applying to you or you applying it to others? If a 500-pound person walked through the room right now, within 300 milliseconds, you're judging them. What are you going to do about that? Well, you could deny that you're doing it. Good luck with that. You could do something healthier. And that's what the path that we're on. The infinite capacity means also, without wisdom and training, the infinite capacity to do harm to yourself and others. Not even meaning to, although you could come to the point where you mean to. I do believe there's evil in the world, although I have to confess I've not yet met the evil person. I've worked with rapists and murderers. I worked in prisons before anything else. I wrote Get Out of Your Mind Into Your Life for Prisoners. That's a story that sadly didn't happen. Good for my wallet, bad for my heart. But I've not met one, but I do believe that we can intend harm and we can certainly do evil things. But how are we going to manage that when we don't come with an owner's manual? And we're going to learn by trial and error, and sometimes with a lot of unwise encouragement from the people around us. So it gets passed on generation by generation. And I like to think we're doing a little better and a little better. I mean, there's less violence in the world than there used to be, for example. But you could hardly pick up any of your screens and convince yourself of that right now. Could be hard. So pick a domain to answer your question. Sense of self, remembering, being in the present, feeling, thinking, sensing, intending, motivation, relationships. Pick any domain, and you can see that there's the constant temptation from logical, reasonable, sensible systems to do that which takes you to this instead of that which takes you to this. What are you going to do about that?
Become a monk?
And then you're still going to work hard on it. I went to, although it turns out I was Jewish by the maternal line. I didn't know that till I was a teenager. I was raised as a Catholic, and I did, I really respected the Jesuits, for example, in the Ignatian way and their contemplative practices. And, our last Pope was really into it. And it's interesting stuff. And I did spend some time on a Hindu offshoot, farm, and on the farm, not really as a member, but to help a friend of mine who needed a house built. She had become pregnant for her child. Joshu Sasaki Roshi, when he first came from Japan to the Royal Marymount, still was speaking only Japanese. So I had exposure to some of these kinds of influences. And of course, as a hippie who sat on Hippie Hill, we all were reading Suzuki and Watts and all that kind of stuff. So that's the extent of my training. It was deeper actually in Jesuitical ideas by far, right? Which are very interesting and worth consideration. The Christian mystics are pretty interesting people. And my main teacher has been misery and maybe a little bit of luck of coming together. And the only thing that I've been trying to do that maybe a little different is to slow down and try to understand the why question before I get out and start proselytizing, here's a great method that will help. And that has served me well, not just me, but those, and it continues to, because our ideas, our ACT ideas, are wrong in every area. And while they're right in some areas, we're learning how much that is true. So we're still developing and we're learning, and that's a good thing.
So, Dr. Hayes, what then are what do you do if, there's that perception that you can't delete in the face of so much entropy and, unhealthy ways we relate to that miasma of relationship? What do you suggest in terms of, is it just to cultivate cognitive flexibility, and what does that look like? Or is there another component? What is ACT?
Yeah, I like to call it ACT because ACT to me sounds like ECT, and I'm old enough to have watched a lot of ECT, electroconvulsive therapy sessions, but it's okay if you want to call it that. But we call it ACT, and people know you've hanging around ACT people if you call it ACT. But what do we do? What's in, we have 1,400 randomized trials now. We grow a new one every 3 days, and that's not the end and be all. I'm very proud of the fact that almost half of them come from lower middle income countries. A very large producer of randomized trials comes out of the Islamic world, for example, or now out of China. So we've been on a journey that is evidence-based, not just defined by that, and the simplest answer to your question would be, what do we do? We take one step at a time, and we focus on the quality of the step and not the outcome, but the direction that it takes us in. And we allow our experience, not over in the short term, because sometimes you take directions that are odd. You may be in a relationship that requires a divorce, for example, and you're really committed to intimate, committed relationships. But here you are, and your spouse is asking to be set free, and you're not going to say, over my dead body. You're probably going to say, okay, let's do it in the best way we possibly can. That's kind to each other and to our children, and respectful of the love that we once had. That's hard. And so turns happen. But if you can focus on what the processes are, by process I mean the smallest steps in all the areas of life that move you forward, where forward is defined by the qualities of being and doing that you wish to put into the world. Not the extrinsic rewards, not something that will come later on from somebody else when you do it. They tend to show up as adverbs or adjectives, like lovingly I'll, genuinely I'll. It's that lighthouse in the distance that you may never meet, but you navigate the terrain, and sometimes you're headed in directions that doesn't look like you're headed that way, but you are keeping your eye on that direction, and you're moving in that direction as best you can. I think, as my mother would say in Yiddish, in your own verstunkene way, thinking, one step at a time, can I be a little bit kinder, a little bit more loving, a little bit more honest and genuine, or whatever the qualities are. I don't think there's a list, and I don't, in a religious or spiritual tradition, there could be a list. But in the world I'm in, I say, don't go there, because nobody, unless you're a pastoral counselor or something, nobody invited you to be a monk. Nobody invited you to give them that kind of spiritual advice. And so we want to play within the domain to which people give us the authority. And So if I'm a plumber, I fix the pipes. I don't say, hey, I don't like the color of the walls in your house. And then in the same way, it depends on the relationship, and you really need to respect that. And I think we've, in our science traditions, often have not respected that. And then this goes very geeky, but some of our analytic traditions, go back to some of the worst parts of our culture, racist and sexist and all those things. And I can get into that if you want to. That's not just a general claim. It's very specific. But where we are right now, what I would want to say to people is life is asking you to learn how to be more open, aware, and actively engaged in a meaningful life, to find this way, and scaling that to your relationships in your body. And if you can, in your own Verstunkene way, hi mom, learn to watch your journey, not in an obsessive way, but just in a mindful way, you might say, and allow yourself to be taught and to be humble enough to not have the answers. Humble comes from a word that means dirt. Put your feet in the dirt.
Hummus.
Yes, absolutely. So that's maybe not a formulaic answer. It's not a rule. Well, if it is a rule, it's a process rule. It's like, what is the practice through which?
I find it very, and we'll get into some skillful, cognitive diffusion methods and what we call skillful means at some point. But before then, I'm struck by I think it was Jung who said that everyone he'd treated after the age of 30, their main problem was lack of a spiritual framework. And it's an interesting assertion because in that miasma of choice and relation, especially in a culture that has, for some good reasons, put aside its religious traditions, and but granted, there's a baby being thrown out with the bathwater issue there. But when is it necessary? Is our culture floundering, and is depression so prominent? Because, you're right. In a certain step, you often can intuitively feel that adverb of like lovingly, openly. But often that's not enough to keep your line straight in some intense tides. So how much is that a root of the problem in our culture? The lack of actually a clear articulation, which religion used to provide, of here's the summum bonum, here's the ultimate goal. And as part of what ACT does is help people articulate that for themselves, is that the commitment and values part. And then I guess you have to move through hurt to discover that, which is fascinating too. But yeah, help me understand this part, Steve, because I find, there's something there about our depression in culture and people not knowing which way to go. And sometimes it's not enough to just know, I want this act to be a bit more loving,
Yes, I agree with that. The place from which you can genuinely care in that way, that is a kind of a leap of faith, you might say. But by faith, I mean the original meaning of the Latin word fides, which meant fidelity. And there is a kind of a self-fidelity, but not in the narrow sense of self. I mean, you as a whole person in a culture, part of a community, part of a wave that's moving through the ocean. I mean, your very body is made up of thousands of people with their stories behind you. And they and the culture the same way, and you're part of that. You're like that little molecule in the ocean that's moving that wave forward. So I think spirituality, the very first article I ever wrote about ACT was called Making Sense of Spirituality, oddly enough, in the journal Behaviorism. And the reason I put it in that journal, one, I knew the editor was a very religious person, Willard Day, who brought me here to the University of Nevada, wonderful, wonderful, kind, and a very strong behaviorist boy, but also a very strong Episcopalian deacon, and committed to his faith journey. People literally would come from around the US of A and sit at his feet because you would lose your faith inside your psychology training. And when I went to Loyola Marymount, I would see that the Jesuits always seemed to revel in, taking some of the farm boy religion and saying, well, this part was written by 9 different scribes over a period of 500 years. And they were going, oh, I thought God wrote it. And they'd laugh, in the theology class. So anyway, so I'm off a little bit, but our deepest spiritual traditions touch a part of us that is transcendent, that connects us in oneness across time, place, and person. Mm-hmm. And most people have spiritual experiences of that kind. Profound. It could be in nature. It could be with their spouse. It could be in a psychedelic trip. I mean, there's all different kinds of things. It could be with meditation. It could be, but most people have touched this deepest sense of self that is beyond categorization, because it has no edges that you can touch. It's not a thing. It's not thing-like. And in the dictionary, spirit is defined as not material. And material links to a root word that means timber. It's the stuff of which things are made, and things are events with spatio-temporal limits. Your oneness in awareness doesn't have spatio-temporal limits. You're not aware of your unawareness. There's no way to be aware of your unawareness. So there's a natural, and that was the core of my argument, was that this is a universal human experience, spirituality. And religion builds on it at its best. It appeals to the best of us. And I like the book Darwin's Cathedral, where my colleague David Sloan Wilson walked through how important religion has been to the survival of the human race. We literally probably would not exist if it wasn't for religion, because we went through choke points where only the religious people were taking care of the sick. Everyone else, it was like a bad Monty Python thing, out with the dead. I'm not dead yet. Bring out your dead. That's that skit. Oh God, that was actually literally true. People would leave their relatives out on the street before they were fully dead because they were so afraid of becoming infected. Come back. Spirituality is important. From that place of you can't sort of deliberately go there and just sit there. We live in a world that is finite and has edges. But when you touch that space and you can kind of ground your being in it, it's a lot easier to onboard the difficult parts of your own history. They don't define you. They're on a journey with you. Come along. I want you with me. You're the source of my wisdom. You're a painful source. And pain is just another face of love. You're in pain about things that you care about. And so that's not logical, but it is psychological. And so if you walk through what we need from our spiritual and religious traditions, I think it's that sense of community that actively encourages you to touch this deeper sense of self, from which you can drop the persona, own up, show up, and begin to onboard more of your own history in the service of the things that you can do for others and yourself. So I think the modern world has not given people a place to go. The cartoon versions of God are suffering and are probably not coming back. We don't have any cultural examples of civilizations that have gone heavy in the science direction and have sort of lost that view of God, then re-adopting it. And I'm not sure God is even the way to talk about it. But we do see, actually, I think, more interest in some ways in spirituality, but it's a loose cannon, and it can easily be selfish. It can be, hey, take this drug and you'll have a vision. Yeah, there might be something in there of loosening up some of these gatekeeper functions that actively filter out sensory motor information so you don't even know the world you live in. I do think there's a role for responsible psychedelic assisted therapy, for example. I really believe in that. But please let's not redo the 60s and 70s. I saw that train wreck. I was part of that train wreck, and friends didn't make it out alive. I mean, literally, my friends, some of them. So I think we need to put something in the modern world that is practical and speaks to what lifts us up. And I kind of like the wings of spiritual traditions that are in active conversations with the best of our scientific traditions. The late John Templeton, who was a Christian, he set up the Templeton Foundation and so forth. He called it humble religion. And what he meant by that is it always had to be modified by our knowledge of the natural world. We don't want to go back to the holy books that said that there were griffins and dragons, and you'd open your eyes and you didn't see any, but if you said there weren't any, they'd burn you at the stake. I mean, that's not coming back. Let's not bring it back. So how are we going to, without irresponsible kinds of behavior, create a culture that can foster spirituality and even religious faith as part of a holistic journey towards being the kind of people that we want to be?
And so once we've touched that deeper strata of ourselves and begin feeling that we can onboard these suffering elements of ourselves, the things that hold us back, can you kind of walk us, like say someone is dealing with a strong echo of shame or something in their past life, a strong pattern. Can you take us through like the 5-minute ACT prescription, including a diffusion? Like how would you approach that, and including the diffusion method or two, because I found those really fun.
There are a lot of diffusion methods, and some of them are humorous, and yet it's very important that you know that you're not ridiculing yourself. You're not ridiculous. You're human, and humor can be transformational. But let's take something like shame. I could remember things that happened in kindergarten that led to an experience of shame, and I'm 77 years old. That means they're at least 72 years old, and probably almost no one is alive who was in that room, and certainly nobody remembers it. So I'll take the most trivial thing. The kindergarten teacher was asking about ways that you could have healthy teeth. And the details of the story may be a little bit off, but I remember the experience very well, where I had an answer, and it was going to be to chew on sugarless gum, and somebody else said it, and then I got called on it, and I couldn't come up with an answer fast enough that was different. Okay, so 72 years later, I'm still thinking about this and feeling a sense of shame in front of the group that I raised my hand, but then I didn't have an answer. Well, what's inside that is that painful thing of maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe I don't belong, or maybe I'm not smart enough, or maybe I'm not welcome in the group. And I remember that the kids laughed a little bit when I didn't have an answer, like I behaved stupidly. Oh, and if I go back, if I could take that moment, if I could meet myself at that age, what I probably would want to do is put little Stevie on my knee, and we would probably play some games that include experiences of not knowing. And I would probably want to make sure that he was hugged by me and knew that he was a lovely little boy who doesn't always have the answers, and that's a good thing. And that's why you go to school. In other words, to show him some kindness. And I don't remember ever talking to my parents about it or whatever, but I do remember that sense of shame, of being ridiculous. Um, I bet you every single person listening right now has a story like that that goes back even to early school days, something you did. So here's an exercise. I'll give you 2 exercises to do. Suppose you could distill that experience down to a self-judgment. Shame usually includes a sense that you've somehow violated group norms and a thought that you're somehow bad, inadequate, unlovable, not smart enough, that you have attached yourself to. We call it fusion. It means, it's a made-up word that means it dominates over other sources of your behavior in ways that are not helpful to you. And so we might do some playful things. Like, let's say I could meet little Stevie and could ask him what kind of thoughts show up. And maybe he might say, I'm stupid. So I might say, yeah, and if you said that word backwards, it would be pid stew. So maybe you're pid stew. And he might laugh at that. Or I might say, and Donald Duck would say, stupid. And I might say the word stupid with him, maybe in a cartoon voice, maybe Donald Duck, if he knows how to play that way. If I'm dealing with an adult, I always like, with kids, I don't mind the playful ones only, but with adults, because I want to avoid this being you ridiculing yourself, I would ask the adult to take now a thought that you have now that really challenges you, that really crunches down on you, that squeezes down. I'm unlovable. If they knew me, they wouldn't want me. I'm mean, whatever. These places where you judge yourself, if they could see my secrets, they wouldn't want me. And I might ask the person to bring that child who first experienced shame into the room. Remember, and people listening to me now will actually do this. Think of a thought that shows up around something that's shameful and painful now. Distill it down just to a few words. I'm stupid would be fine, but it could be anything. I'm a liar, whatever. Now, especially the kind of stuff that you say to the person in the mirror when you're brushing your teeth without a second thought. Bring the little kid in at the age when that first started, the I'm not good enough story started. And really picture what you looked like when you were that young. And have that little one say that exact words that you say to yourself mentally, or if you're thinking images, the image, while brushing your teeth, in his or her little voice. Just do it mentally. And my question to you would be, what would you do if this moment actually happened? If you were actually with yourself at that age and you heard coming out of that mouth stuff like, nobody on my work team wants to work with me, or I'm going to be fired because I'm so incompetent, or I don't know what it is, or deep down there's something wrong with me. When people go there, almost universally, they want to hug the kid. They don't want to slap the kid and say, snap out of it, you big baby. So can we bring the same sense of self-compassion that we would show for ourselves as children or for other children to ourselves as adults? We're still a work in progress, Excuse me for living. We're human beings and we're making errors all the time. So that would be an example. Use a few of the diffusion methods, the playful kinds of things you can do with language. Saying it repeatedly, distill it down to a word, I'm a liar, say the word liar over and over again for 30 seconds. By the time you finish, if you go once per second, it'll have half of its impact. And there's hundreds of examples of it, but then the reason I did the little kid one is I want you to know that this is not self-ridicule. That's not what it is. It's something more like, letting go of the tendency of the language monster to claim the whole of you, and sort of respectfully declining the invitation to take those thoughts so seriously that they cover your face and make it impossible for you to be here now.
For me, it traces, or it echoes. I mean, the tracing back to the child is an invocation for me of the Four Noble Truths again, or of the first of dukkha, and turning towards that initiating wound, but then with kind of robbing the concept of its power and leaving the words as just the words. There's a sutta called the Bahia Sutta, where the Buddha says, in the seen, let there just be the seen, and the heard, let there just be the heard. This is the end of suffering, Bahia. And and there's one other one I've heard you speak about, which I do want, we'll move on to Zoom in a second, but
Sure.
Charles especially wanted you to do this, is he was going to ask if you could sing one or two of the songs you've created.
Oh my, that would be, could I actually do it? I have recently been playing songs and creating songs using AI and writing the lyrics, because music is the most emotional thing there is in the art forms for me. I mean, theater, yes. Literature, of course. Art, yes, moving. But universally, almost everybody is moved by music. There was a parent who reached out to me who wanted to write this song, and I'm opening the lyrics right now so that I can not stumble over them, because that's not so fun to have my old 77-year-old brain be there. All right. I have the lyrics up, so I should be able to do it. And this parent was asking for a song that built off something that I had sent her before. I had a song about giving your mind a name. And she had a little one who I suggested that her name, that she said, I said that she name her mind Zumi. And there's a song about how Zumi runs around and is very busy, and it's constantly telling you that you have to do this and you have to do that. And it, it's like a playful pup jumping up and knocking down your cup. It's not trying to be mean. It's not your enemy. It just tags along and scolds and pokes, and it even says it's me. Anyway, so that was Zumi, and this was a song called Leaves from My Tree. And I'm going to try to sing it, by golly.
Go for it, Steve.
Music. Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
This is for an older child, the same parent. And it has a little piece in there, giving your mind a name. It's going to, in this case, it's going to be Wiggly. And, but the reason I wanted to do it is I wanted to help an older child, this is more like an 8 or 9-year-old, see that sometimes the mind gets in the way of your ability to connect with others, and you don't realize that they have thoughts like you, but you're not saying it because you're feeling ashamed, you're feeling alone, you're feeling that you're the only one. Maybe your only best friends would you share. But if you can give your mind a name and show it a little kindness, but also realize what it's giving you is very temporary. And the metaphor I used, it's like a tree with branches, and the leaves fall and they blow away. But meanwhile, the branches keep growing. That's sort of a metaphor for our values and our skills in being able to live a values-based life. But we're like a tree, the winds come, and we don't want to be rigid. We want to bend with the breeze, because life will challenge you. And you're able to do that because of the roots. And they grow deep. And when you can do that, you can be together with others, with other children, each who are doing the same thing. And the roots, of course, are consciousness itself, awareness itself, this deepest, more spiritual parts of us. So let's see. I've never sung this a cappella. Okay. Some of it will just sound like I'm repeating words, but let's see. My mind's named Wiggly. It chats all day. What if they don't like me? What if they say, with thoughts like leaves, they fall and sway. From my branches they float, then drift away. I'm a tree that's growing, so strong, so tall. My roots hold me, and I won't fall. I don't need to be stiff. I can bend with the breeze. I reach for the sky, even with those leaves. Wiggly whispers, what if I'm shy? Is it okay not to know or answer why? I watch as those leaves each take their ride, but I stand steady, my branch is wide. I'm a tree that's growing, so strong, so tall. My roots hold me, and I won't fall. I don't need to be stiff. I can bend with the breeze. I reach for the sky, even with those leaves. My friends have branches with leaves that fall. Their minds talk too, like one and all. Our branches touch, we grow side by side. Our roots together, no need to hide. Side by side, we'll grow and grow. We'll learn together, and then we'll know. Side by side, we'll grow and grow. We'll learn together, and then we'll know. I'm a tree that's growing, so strong, so tall. My roots hold me, and I won't fall. I don't need to be stiff. I can bend with the breeze. I reach for the sky, even with those leaves. Leaves from my tree, they come and go. But I'm still me, and my branches grow. My roots dig deeper every day. I belong, I learn, and I play.
Steve, if I was allowed to clap, I would be clapping right now. That was the first musical act we've had on Clear Mountain's YouTube channel. Thank you.
Well, thank you for letting me do that. That was Charles really
No.
crazy.
Dr. Hayes, we will jump over to Zoom now so people can actually speak to you kind of more intimately and in person, so to speak. And I'll post the link to that in the chat. But just, yeah, the combination of kind of the personal journey you shared, the intellectual rigor of the system you've developed and how many people it's helped, and the fact that you mix it with Donald Duck and singing and a certain, sparkle it's just a real pleasure to see and be a part of. And thank you on behalf of all those who have benefited from the systems you've helped spread with therapy. It's a huge boon in the world. So thank you so much.
Well, and thank you for the opportunity and for the work that you do. And people have told me about the work, and I can feel it in our dialogue here. And so thank you for the opportunity, but also thank you for all of that. And I hope I've been able to be of some service.
It was wonderful having you. And if you're ever in Seattle, come visit us. So
yes, I will.
All right. We'll see you over on Zoom soon, people. Click on the link in the chat. Bye, Dr. Hayes.
All right. I'm headed over. Should I close?